This past semester, during my student teaching field placement, I worked with second semester seniors at Blacksburg High School. The completely originally designed unit plan that I created covered William Shakespeare's Othello. I was extremely excited to have the opportunity to work with this play because it's one of my favorite Shakespearean tragedies. Part of this unit required the development of an action research project. Through observing how I was conveying the material and the success of the specific methods I incorporated, I was to find something that could have been improved or enhanced or made more efficient through the incorporation of technology. After a great deal of observation and reflection, I decided to incorporate the concept of student-created podcasts into the unit. It was my hope that the podcast could serve not only as a final assessing tool for the unit, but also as a means for students to share their knowledge of the play and issues prevalent throughout the play in a more meaningful form. Throughout the unit, I collected data that helped push me towards my decision of having students create a podcast. I continuously faced the comments and questions of what's going on, what's he saying, this is stupid, I don't understand. So I had students complete multiple in-class assessments to help guide their reading and help them create meaning of the play and issues for themselves. Through multiple class discussions and small group discussions and various forms of strategies to address different issues and meaning, and all other aspects of my lessons, I tried to help students to understand and begin making their own meaning of the text. At the close of our final discussion of the play, I gave students these differential scale sheets on their comprehension of Othello and asked them to rate their knowledge of the play, understanding the text, and then also if they'd ever worked with these technology tools that they'd be using. I wanted to know where students were before they began the project so I would have a better idea of their growth as a result of the project. This image displays the various forms of final assessment that can be incorporated into a unit. I decided to incorporate all three, a unit test, an analytical essay, and then the student's design podcast. I feel that these different forms of assessment measure different aspects of student knowledge and that they all push students' growth in various ways. This collage of images represents my students' talents, interests, and diversity. Each of my students have something unique to bring to the table. It was my hope that creating a podcast would allow them to draw on their interests and talents and help create something that shows a little bit more of themselves in the product. To begin this project, I incorporated one of the teaching strategies that I read about in Nancy Atwell's In the Middle. She devotes an entire chapter to the concept of mini-lessons. I incorporated this strategy in my teaching multiple times, and each time found it to be successful. A mini-lesson allows me to convey the information I believe students need to proceed, and then devotes the bulk of the class period to students actually using and implementing that material. The podcast project itself required students to use either Audacity or the Flipmino cameras and Windows Movie Maker. I asked students to choose one of the 17 choices on the back of their podcast guidelines. I went through the entire play and broke the scenes into approximately 5-page snippets. I asked students to choose the particular scene that they wanted to, and then do a dramatic reading of the text, and then pause at logical moments to break down the meaning of the text for the listening audience. They were to address not only the literal surface meaning of what was happening, but also dive deeper and discuss the significance of the piece, larger relevant issues that it discussed, how it impacted the rest of the play, etc. My original intent was to have students learn to read and break down Shakespeare without my help. We spent the bulk of the unit with me breaking up the text. I wanted my students to take on that role and create meaning for themselves. I also wanted them to create a final product that other students studying Othello could use as a tool to help them understand the play. We did run into some problems, specifically the groups using the Flipmino cameras and Windows Movie Maker. I think it was partially the school computers and technology, and partially how my students were saving their work that created these horrible errors. But after a few massive headaches, we were able to find a way to get the Mino group's work compiled into Movie Maker. Just took patience and a little bit of etc. I listened to each of the podcasts multiple times before I gave a final assessment. I created the podcast feedback sheets, and as students listened to their peers' work in class, they gave an in-depth evaluation along with an assigned grade. It was interesting to see the difference in students' evaluations and my own. In some classes, students graded more harshly, some graded easy, and others hit it right on the nose with me. I felt that giving students time to evaluate their peers would start the overall process of students getting feedback from someone other than just their teacher, which would add a more meaningful experience to their work. The final element to this project was to have students write a short one-page reflection to help synthesize their work. This provided an opportunity for students to reflect on the entire process, the unit, and anything else they wanted to include. It also provided me with the opportunity to get a lot of honest feedback from my students. Some discussed how they felt it was a great project, others not so much. Overall, I had more positive reflections than negative. I felt that the project was a success, and that students demonstrated an understanding of the text that a Scantron test wouldn't have been able to show. I definitely plan on incorporating this idea again into my future teaching practice. There are elements that need some tweaking, like next time I will stay consistent with the tools using all Audacity unless I decide to add the element of video. I also want to make it more clear for students to take the project on a more creative route. But overall, it was successful, and I would recommend for all teachers everywhere to experiment with different projects like this.